what's up, VC? It's Steve again, Harmless Rebel, and it's time for another country music vinyl update. This one's not as much an update as just showing what I've been listening to. A lot of this stuff, about half of it is newer within the last few months. Some of it's stuff I just pulled out to spin again, including what's playing in the background. This is one of the all-time classics. Probably one of the more important albums of the 70s in that it really spawned the outlaw country music, in that Honky Tonk Heroes from Waylon Jennings, which is widely considered to be the album that started the outlaw country movement. Half the songs came off of this album. And this is Billy Joe Shaver, Old Five and Dimers Like Me. Just an absolute class. Actually, the song that was playing in the background there, Old Five and Dimers Like Me, was also one of the big hits off of Honky Tonk Heroes. Really a must-have album, but it is getting hard to find. This one was VCLT from Brother Billy. So thanks again, Billy. I play the hell out of this. So let's just kind of jump in. Just kind of a pretty good mix of country here. Some modern stuff, some older stuff. And when I say modern, I'm talking modern, traditional sounding country, not modern, what you hear on the radio, country music. But this one, speaking of Billy, Billy is really the one that got me kicked off listening to this particular artist. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to go see him. He's actually playing maybe this month, I believe, here in Atlanta. But I had to choose between him and Judas Priest. And seeing as this may be the last time that Judas Priest and Deep Purple ever tour, I had to go with them. But I do want to see Steve Earle. He actually comes through here pretty regularly. But this is El Corazon. This was a Record Store Day release. I believe it was the first time this was released on vinyl. And this is a great album. This is more his later. I think this was 97. So a little earlier than I was thinking. Really good album, though. I really prefer this mid-90s era of Steve Earle over his earlier stuff. That's not to say I don't like his first few albums. I definitely love Guitar Town. I love that period, but something about this 90s period has more of that alt-country sound that he really kind of helped create, you know. A lot of the alt-country bands that I love now, and I'll show a couple of those albums in a little bit, really got their sound and the idea for their sound from Steve Earle. But just a killer album. I can't remember if this is on colored vinyl or not. But again, this was a Record Store Day release. Let me see. And is that? No, that's not. It's on black vinyl. I think it came with the artwork too. Yeah, a little insert with the artwork from the album. So we got a little bit of Steve Earle there. Next up, just some classic. I don't like this as much as the two albums prior to this, but I've been kind of on a Ricky Skaggs kick. If you're not familiar with Ricky Skaggs, he kind of blended 80s country, or not just 80s country, but country music in the 80s with a little bit of bluegrass. He had a little bit of both. And all through the 70s, he was a bluegrass musician, and his 80s albums touched on both, and I really dig the stuff that he did in both genres. This one had a couple of decent songs, but definitely not a favorite. But this is Love's Gonna Get Ya. Next up, just an absolute classic, Waylon and Willie, WW2. Just, I mean, it doesn't get much better than Waylon and Willie. Let's see what's... Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, they do a killer version of that. Last Cowboy Song is a Waylon song that's phenomenal. Heroes, Waylon and Willie. Write Your Own Songs is a great one. Just a really good album. If you're a fan of Waylon and Willie, one you got to have. The founding mothers and father of country music right here. This is a Pickwick comp, I think, or Camden. It's funny, there's so many greatest hits from this band, and almost every greatest hits collection has different songs, which I really love. Because, you know, finding, I mean, you can't find the 78s of their music without paying an arm and a leg for it, or they're just completely trashed. And even some of the earlier LPs are getting hard to find and getting expensive. But this is the original and great Carter Family. Again, one of the most important bands in country music. Their level of importance is right up there with Robert Johnson and the blues. And I chose Robert Johnson specifically because Robert Johnson was really famous for the playing rhythm and lead at the same time. And Ma Mabel did the same exact thing. She did what was called the Carter, what did they call it? The Carter Sweep, where she was playing the lead on her fingers up here, and she was doing rhythm with her fingers down here. And they kind of did it, it's different styles. She wasn't like copying that Robert Johnson style of playing. It was very original. And just everything that they did was super influential. Just a killer band. I prefer the early stuff with A.P. Carter. I don't mind the stuff from the 50s and 60s with the Mabel women. That's where you start hearing June Carter. They've got some beautiful stuff too. I just definitely prefer the stuff with AP. Next, I don't know if this was his most recent release or not. This was 2016, but this is Dwight Yoakam, the Bluegrass Sections, the Bluegrass Sessions. And he covers some great stuff in here. You got Purple Rain. He does Guitars, Cadillacs. What else is on here? These Arms. This was a limited pressing. I don't know how many they did, but if you're a Dwight Yoakam fan, it's definitely one you got to get. I think this one's on colored vinyl too. And this is one I didn't know that was released. It's kind of a clear with a little bit of blue there. I didn't know this was released until I ran across it in one of my local stores about a month or two ago, and I've given it 3 or 4 spins. I'm really digging it. There's really nothing that Dwight Yoakam has released that I haven't loved, so no surprise there. Next up, again, another one of the most influential voices in country music. This is actually somebody that my grandfather shared the stage with. He didn't play in the band with him, but he opened up as a local act for this particular artist, and he got to see him a number of times in Louisiana. But this is Hank Williams Sr. This is all of his all of his performances kind of pieced together from the various times he recorded at the Grand Ole Opry. And I mean, you got Lovesick Blues, Cold Cold Heart. I mean, just absolute country music classics. I Don't Like This Kind of Living. Cold Cold Heart, Long Gone Lonesome Blues. I mean, just beginning to end, a phenomenal album. If you run across this, you should be able to find it for cheap. I think I paid $4 or $5 for this, but to hear him play at the Opry is definitely worth the cost of admission. Next up, somebody who's become a favorite of mine over the last few years. Do I want to go there? Actually, yeah. Before I get into the more modern stuff, let me show you one more classic. This is one I just recently picked up. I think I already had a copy of it. I'm going to have to check. But this one was Stone Mint. It was still in the shrink. It looked like it had never been played. But this is Merle Haggard and the Strangers live in New Orleans. It's I Love Dixie Blues, so I recorded it live in New Orleans. That's the full name of the album. But just some classic albums. He also played some traditional New York albums. But just some really good Dixie blues stuff here. And then he finishes off the show with Okie from Muskogee and I Wonder If They Ever Think of Me, which is a phenomenal song. He dedicated that one to the veterans, and this was back in 78 or 79, I want to say. Does it say when he recorded this? Of course, I'm not seeing it. Oh, wow. This was recorded in 73. I thought this was a lot later, but still, great live album from Merle Haggard. Definitely worth checking out. And then now we'll get into a little bit more modern stuff. This is actually the second album I've bought from this band. The first album I didn't like, but I found this one for $11, so I grabbed it, and I thought, worst case, I could send it off to somebody as VCLT that would like it more than me. And I really ended up digging it. I believe this may be one of their earlier albums, but I'm not 100% sure. I can't remember what I read about it. Maybe it was that they had kind of fallen out. I think what had happened is for a few years there, I think this is one of their recent albums, now that I come to think of it. Let me look at the year. Let's see if it says. They were really influential early on. And then I want to say people kind of lost interest. They lost a portion of their fan base, and this was kind of a return to form. This is 2014, so this is definitely a newer album, because I want to say they've been out since the early 90s. But this is the old 97s, Most Messed Up, and this is a great album. I really dug this. It started off kind of weak. I want to say the first song already kind of led me to think that this was going to be a bad album. And by the second or third song, I was really digging it. And I've given this 3 or 4 spins, and it's really been an enjoyable album. So I don't know about the rest of their catalog. Like I said, I've heard some stuff of theirs that I didn't like at all. I would definitely recommend checking this one out, though. And then let's turn the record over. Alrighty, next up, let's see which one I want to do first. I can't remember if this is the first one that he released with the 400 unit, but this is Jason Isbell and the 400 unit. Here We Rest. I've shown Jason Isbell a bunch of times. I'm a big fan of everything he's done, whether it was his early stuff with the Drive-By Truckers, which is by far my favorite releases from the Drive-By Truckers, whether it was with his band, the 400 unit, or his solo stuff. Absolutely phenomenal. This album does not disappoint at all. Highly recommend picking this one up. Actually, any of his albums. This one, I don't think it's... Oh, yeah, and this one actually came with a 7-inch as well. So you got 2 additional songs. I believe this one's just on black vinyl, and it is. Really good, though. He's considered alt country, but there's really a lot of traditional country in here. He does get a little bit rocky on some of the songs, but not in a bad way. And again, I recommend anything that you see with Jason Isbell's name on it is definitely worth checking out. And that being said, next up we've got his debut solo, or his solo debut, Sirens of the Ditch. I've been looking for this for a long time, and somebody finally posted a copy for a decent price. I think I paid 20 bucks. I was disappointed that it's hard to see, and the shrink kind of hides it, but it did get crunched a little bit because the guy didn't pack it right. But they only pressed 300 of this. This is one of the Newberry Comics exclusives. I love this album. This and Southeaster are my favorite Jason Isbell releases of all the stuff that he's done. Here's the vinyl. It's on this really cool yellow, clear, I don't know what you would call that. What do they call it? Yellow swirl. I wouldn't really call it yellow swirl, but killer album. Absolutely love everything he's done. I actually saw him a couple of weeks ago. I went to one of the Atlanta Braves games that they unfortunately lost in the last minute. One of the worst baseball games I've ever been to. The worst endings, I should say. They were ahead 3-0. It was actually a really action-packed game. They were ahead 3-0. They needed one more out in the bottom of the 9th. Had they got one more out, the game would have been over. Was it? No, it had to be I'm sorry. Anyway, they needed one more out. They called out their big name pitcher for that one out. They scored 3 points on him. It was ridiculous. It was so bad. And then it went to the next inning, and the team scored 3 more, and they lost 6-3. Most ridiculous game ever. However, the game was followed up with a concert by Jason Isbell and the 400 unit, and it was an amazing concert. What I really liked is he didn't just play 400 unit songs. He played about 4 400 unit songs. Then he played 2 or 3 Drive-By Trucker songs that he wrote. And then he went into his solo songs. He did 3 or 4 solo songs, and then he did a couple more of the 400 unit songs. He sounded absolutely phenomenal, considering we were not in a concert venue. The bad thing about the baseball stadiums when they're not specifically set up for a concert is that you get an echo. And this was basically, they set up a small stage in the middle of the field. You could pay extra money to be on the field. We had good seats where we were, so I wasn't going to pay an extra 30 bucks for myself and my daughter to go down, 30 bucks each to go down and be in front of him. We were real happy where we were, but there was a little bit of an echo. Still, absolutely phenomenal. He did a really killer show. Last up, somebody who's really coming to his own. He's got a brand new album that's come out. I haven't listened to the whole thing yet, but I love the 2 tracks I have heard. And this is Shooter Jennings. I've talked about him a bunch over the last few years. I couldn't believe that I ran across this. I think I paid $20. Every time I see this, it's $40 or $50. It's only been released once on vinyl, and it's super hard to find. But this is Family Man. Just an amazing, amazing album. If you like traditional country music, you'll love this album. Shooter Jennings, you gotta kind of watch out for, because he's done some rock stuff too. I don't like the rock stuff as much. It's not bad. I just prefer his country music. His traditional country music is really where it's at. And I believe this was only released on red vinyl. This was from 2012. Awesome album. And all of his early albums, his first 3 or 4 albums on vinyl, all command insane prices. So like I said, I was really surprised to see this for what I paid for it. That's pretty much it, guys. I hope everybody's doing good, and I will see you soon. Take care, BC.